routine, I check Facebook, which often has links to the latest news. Now, most of the news stories tend to leave me shaking my head or thinking that the world's a pretty crappy place. And of course, later on, I'll travel to a client's house, and sometimes they'll have on Fox News or, better, CNN. Whoops, sneak peek there, you didn't see that. Okay, so when I go to a client's house and they often have Fox playing, I kind of get the message. Now, hear this, I don't ever intentionally watch Fox News. My husband does occasionally for entertainment purposes, so he says entertainment. I don't find it entertaining, but I really do. Sometimes when I'm working with clients, they'll have Fox News on in the background, and I hear this overwhelming theme of beware, build a bunker, take up arms, sure as hell don't trust your neighbor because they're probably drinking Obama Kool-Aid. I have many clients who really do get their news from Fox. One of them actually shared with me that she is scared to go on a cruise. And I thought she was scared to go on a cruise because, you know, you might get the norovirus or something like that. But no, she was convinced that if you go on a cruise that the service providers are going to not only rob you and steal all your stuff because you're on a ship stuck with them, but also, you know, they're going to take advantage of you and all these other horrific stories, which I have never, ever really heard happening. I'm sure there's always an instance of some sort, but never heard that before. So I noticed this resounding distrust from my clients who tend to get their news from Fox. But let's also recognize that CNN, not that much better. When it comes to painting a world of chaos, of dog eat dog, an eye for an eye, they're just as bad. You've heard the media statement of if it bleeds, it leads. I think CNN kind of runs with that as well. So usually around dinner time, my husband turns on NBC Nightly News, which gives me an additional dose of negativity. Now, I also saw recently that Brian Williams on that nightly news was with Jesus when he was crucified, and that he was on the moon as well. But anyway, so we watch our evening news. I get an extra sense of dread. Now, don't get me wrong, I definitely think we should stay informed about what's going on in our world. Hugely important, very, very much so. But it's the way that it's presented and the way we focus on it that is overwhelmingly negative. We are continually bombarded by the belief that our world is going to hell in a handbasket. So as Chicken Little enthusiastically said, title, the sky is falling. But is it really? Is it really all that bad? Well, according to a show on National Geographic, it's just so bad that you should probably prepare for it. Doomsday Preppers, anyone watch this? I watched it, you know, it's like watching, you know, chaos. So this show features individuals and families who expect the world to end soon, therefore they spend exorbitant amounts of time and money preparing for this really bad thing that they all think is different going to happen. This was one I remember distinctly watching. I think they tried to build a fort out of trailer, I'm assuming these are train trailers. I wouldn't want these people as my neighbor, and I don't think they want anyone else as their neighbor either. What's really concerning about the people on this show is that they have this mentality of us against them. They literally do not trust anyone who might be the other. And they probably would literally shoot you on command, and this is one of the preppers. So if you don't get your news from a regular news channel, you may get it from social media like Facebook or Twitter. Now these mediums are not any better at painting a pretty picture of the world. Social media may even be far worse at fostering misinformation and causing the written word to be misinterpreted. I remember on my feed last night when the sirens went off, I'm sure most of you all experienced that as well. I was trying to go back to sleep, and I did what I shouldn't do, and I was scrolling Facebook, and it was just one after another of negative things, and of course, the intermittent, why are the sirens going off, you know, kind of deal. Save the animals, children are dying somewhere in some country, funny cat video, and then a friend kind of telling me I need Jesus, all in one evening. So if that's what you're feeding your mind, you are probably going to think that the sky is in fact falling. Now I find this concerning because I think it fosters feelings of hopelessness. It can also foster feelings of powerlessness, which can lead to apathy. Now I suppose this negative bias feeds our lizard or our primal brain that used to have to focus on survival. But guess what? We don't have to work that hard to survive anymore. Yet here we are, still attracted to information that is misrepresentative of the state of our world. So today, I'm going to dispel the myth that the sky is falling, and that the negativity bias that we often eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner is not an accurate depiction of the world today. The state of our world is actually so much better than CNN or Fox would like you to think. Humanity as a whole has made great strides, and we have reason to be hopeful and excited about the future at large. So first, violent crime and homicides in Europe and the US are way down. The government's US crime statistics have been improving steadily over the last 15 years, but several Gallup measures of America's perceptions of crime have edged back to be much more negative. Now, I'll never forget when my son Nash was over a week and a half late, and one of the solutions to going to labor was to walk. My midwife came over to our house, and I told her I was going to keep walking because I was determined that this was going to finally happen and I wasn't going to be induced. And it became dark, and she looked at me in horror when I was about to leave to go walk more, and because she thought my neighborhood was dangerous. Okay, I live in suburban, pretty much Liberty. It's not dangerous. Yes, I still live in the city limits of Kansas City, but it is a pretty nice, average suburban neighborhood. My midwife's from like rural Kansas. So it was really interesting that she thought my neighborhood was dangerous. I mean, how dangerous is it for a 9-month pregnant woman to walk on sidewalks? We have sidewalks, we have street lights. I mean, it's not that dangerous. But she had this overwhelming distrust because I was in the city of Kansas City. Now, despite this sharp decline in the US violent crime rate since the 1990s, the majority of Americans continue to believe the nation's crime problem is getting worse, but it's not. Currently, 68% say there is more crime in the US this year than there was a year ago. More than half of them say that the nation's crime problem is very serious, and 2/3 say it's getting worse, but it's not. This also leads me to ask, well, then how safe is this world for my kids? One of my clients also shared with me that she used to walk to school, not like uphill both ways, but she used to walk about a mile through the woods behind her house to get to school. The irony being that she now lives in Oasis. The school is across the street from their house. It may be like just kind of a little bit to the corner, but she doesn't let her daughter, who is in 5th grade, walk herself to school. And I kind of am like, oh wow, that's crazy. And then I realized I had a hard time having my 7-year-old walk 4 houses down to go to the bus stop that I could watch from my front steps. So I too still had this kind of perception I needed to like shelter my kids from that. But the reality is that it's probably unnecessary that I'm that concerned. Now, we do have these Amber Alerts, which I think is a really, really great thing. It's truly a life-saving program. But when you have an Amber Alert go off a couple times a month, you begin to think that children are being kidnapped on a regular basis, or you kind of get numb to it. It's like, oh, it's another Amber Alert, you know, you don't pay attention as much. Apathy, right? But the Department of Justice reports that 800,000 children who are reported missing in the US each year, only 115 of those are a result of what you would consider stereotypical kidnapping, a stranger snatching a child. Now granted, 115 is still horrible, well, don't want my child kidnapped. But it's important to recognize that that means that there's 90% of abductees return home within 24 hours, and the vast majority actually are teenagers who have run away. So maybe we shouldn't be quite so scared of the random white van that drives down our street. They're not all out to steal our children. Second, we live in the most peaceful times in human history. This particular chart starts back from the 1300s. Homicides per 100,000 people per year. England was not a really fun place to live. You were highly likely of dying around the 1400s. But you can see this plummet of decline in general violence and death by homicide or death by war. Steven Pinker does a really, really great job of illustrating this reality in his book called The Better Angels of Our Nature. The book is massive. I'm not even fully through it yet, but I highly recommend it. One of the best books I've ever read. So if you can get that, do it. Peter Singer wrote in the New York Times about Pinker's book by stating, since 1945, we have seen a new phenomenon known as the long peace. For 66 years now, the great powers and the developed nations in general have not fought wars against one another. More recently, since the Cold War, a broader new peace appears to have taken hold. If not, of course, an absolute peace, but there has been a decline in all kinds of organized conflicts, including civil wars, genocides, repression, and even, believe it or not, terrorism. Pinker admits that followers of news media have a particularly difficult time believing this, and I'm sure you're doubting me right now. But as always, Pinker does have statistics to support these claims as well, and they're in his book. Third, extreme poverty has fallen around the world. The extraordinary rate, am I at the right one? Yeah. The extraordinary rate of economic growth in India and China, as well as the smaller and still significant growth in smaller developing countries, has led to a huge decline in the share of the world population living on less than $1.25 a day. It was 53% in 1981 to 17% in 2011. That's huge. This graph here is the global hunger index, which is calculated, this starts in 1990, I'm going to scroll through and you'll see the difference here. It's calculated by the percentage of the population that is undernourished, children younger than 5 who are underweight, and children who die before the age of 5 is how they calculate this. So this starts in 1990, and you want to look for the pinkish magenta, I don't know what color, and then the gold countries as I progress about every 5 years here. So this is 1990. 1995, India, you'll notice India, right here, went from magenta to gold. 1995, 2000, 2005, and then 2014. It's drastic improvement. Fourth, child mortality is also down. Child mortality has fallen by nearly half since just 1990. If you look at developing regions, the gains are even more impressive. In East Asia, Latin America, and North Africa, the under 5 mortality rate fell by over 2/3 from 1990 to 2013. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it fell by 48%. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm conveying. There's obviously a lot of work to be done, and progress is no excuse for complacency, but I think the trends are very, very encouraging. Fifth, religion is on the decline. Now, I'm sure maybe some of you saw that, and I'll justify this, I'm not hating on religion by any means, I'm literally working off of statistics. But the Pew Research Studies came out again with new data from 2007 to 2014 showing that the decline in religiosity, or those who identify as unaffiliated, just had another steep decline. More steep than anything we have ever seen in recorded human history. So I share this with you because where religiosity is lowest, crime rates and the rate of violence is also lower. Secular social researcher and author of Living the Secular Life, Phil Zuckerman, very good book by the way, he states, murder rates are actually lower in more secular nations and higher in more religious nations where belief in God is widespread. Of the top 50 safest cities in the world, nearly all are relatively non-religious countries. Within the US, we see the exact same pattern. Within America, the states with the highest murder rates tend to be the highly religious, Louisiana and Alabama. But the states with the lowest murder rates tend to be among the least religious in the country, Vermont and Oregon. And these findings are not limited to murder rates. as rates of violent crime tend to be higher in all religious states. Zuckerman also points out that atheists are very underrepresented in our prison systems. It's actually only 0.2%. So, with more education and reason, we will be better equipped to rationally address the problems of this world. And we are getting there at a rate never before seen in human history. I think that should all give us hope. Lastly, narcissism is not necessarily on the rise. I've been encountering many articles declaring that this is the age of the selfie, which is evidence of this huge shift towards narcissism. One study even suggested that narcissism in American college students is up by a whole 30% in the last 30 years. So with all this talk about how the next generation is technically more selfish is really what they're wanting to say, there is good evidence to the contrary. I suggest that our country is not becoming increasingly self-focused. Rather, it's always been pretty individually focused, which is not necessarily a great thing, but it does not mean that the next generation is becoming more pathologically self-focused or narcissistic. They're just being true to our American culture. From a cross-cultural standpoint, the US is really famous for being an individualistic society, and you know it's true. I'm guilty of it as well. Many like to point to social media and blame it for making the next generation so much more selfish. The drastic increase of social media created a notable rise in options to show off and sources to turn to for instant recognition, measured by how many likes on pictures you get or likes on your videos. However, recent research finds that if you ask people to increase their use of social media, this does not make them more narcissistic or selfish over time. So I think it makes sense that standard self-interest, self-promotion, and social media, they're a good match for each other, but they don't have much to do with pathological narcissism. Neurology is also highlighting the part of human nature that is empathic and altruistic. Our ability to cooperate and work as a community or a tribe is becoming more and more evident. I like how author and empathy researcher Roman Krznaric writes, for the past 100 years, influential thinkers from Thomas Hobbes to Sigmund Freud have been telling us that we are essentially self-interested, self-preserving creatures who pursue our own individualistic needs. Over time, this dark depiction of human beings has become our prevailing view of Western culture. In the last decade, however, it has been nudged firmly to one side by evidence that we are also what he calls homo empathicus. We are wired for empathy. So, because we are this age of the selfie, I thought it would be appropriate for me to take a selfie of everyone and you, because it's only right and we're Americans and I'm just doing us all a really great favor. So if you do not want your face anywhere, just cover your face, otherwise make a really smile. Okay, ready? All right, and include everyone. Ready? You're welcome. Making Julie proud, right? Except for Twitter, and more selfies the better, right? So why should we take the time to recognize the positives in the world? Because it directly affects our ability to be a force for good. This is my anecdotal opinion, I will admit. So if you believe that the world's a dark, scary place, then it will be a dark, scary place, and you will probably make choices that will help make that a reality in your world. In my work as an organizer, I work with people who have literally become overwhelmed by a space or a situation. Walk-in closets that are so full you can't even open the door, extra bedrooms, basements, garages, whatever, offices that become random catch-alls. The space has literally overwhelmed them so much that they can no longer see solutions to fixing it, and they have lost an ability to be motivated as well to do anything about it, resulting in feelings of hopelessness, powerlessness, and apathy. My first goal in working with them is to help them to see visible progress. Time and time again, it's all they need to feel empowered to tackle other areas of their house, and even sometimes that carries into other areas of their life. It's really incredible. I think this happens with our perception of our influence on the world. So surround yourself with information or news that paints a picture that you have little to no control over really big problems. Problems that make you feel so overwhelmed that all you can do is shut the door on it and go on about your life. So without hope, why try to make the world a better place? If you feel powerless, how can you feel motivated to do something about it? If you feel overwhelmed by all the shitty parts of life, why bother trying? By recognizing the progress that humanity has made in the world, you can gain perspective and find that we can continue to improve living conditions and situations here locally and around the world. We have a very unique opportunity here at Oasis to be a unique force for good in our local community and at the world at large. So for the first time in history, we have the ability to build community and connections among other people who recognize that people are more important than beliefs, and that reality is known through reason. We can help start just simple conversations that help us gain perspective on events, situations, so much so that we can empower each other to do something about it and to foster hope to fuel that fire. It may sound cliche or even possibly arrogant, but I can't help but think that we are part of something incredibly revolutionary, something that can help people to recognize the progress, feel empowered to tackle challenges, feel hope for the future, because without that, we may as well crawl back into our little bunker and resign ourselves to whatever the media wants us to believe. So, recognizing the progress humanity has made makes me also a better, stronger humanist. The Oasis value, human hands solve human problems, is because, so the statistics and progress that I shared with you today is because human beings did something about it. It's you and I helping to improve the world. It's our fellow human being who fed the hungry, provided much needed medical care in very poor parts of the world, or those who simply came up with solutions to make our communities safer. So I have really good news for you all. The sky is not falling. Thanks.